Biden is begging, literally begging, the Iranians to accept this second round of an Iran nuclear deal. This is a deal that would give Iran's leadership, the terror masters in Tehran, $275 billion or so in the first year and upwards of $1 trillion over the next decade.
Joining us now from Jerusalem, Joel Rosenberg, the host of TBN's new weekly series, The Rosenberg Report, which will be premiering on this network October 6th. Joel, wonderful to see you.
Great to be with you and on Centerpoint. It's an honor to be on the TBN family.
Well, thanks. And we can't wait to see your show. And I'm going to ask you about that in just a little while. But first, this is one of the busiest news days I've seen in a long time. So I want to get to some of the news and some of your perspective on it. First of all, the war in Ukraine right now. For the first time, we are seeing a world leader, Vladimir Putin, suggest the use of nuclear weapons in an offensive manner. This is a war that Vladimir Putin commenced himself. The war's not going well, and now he's threatened the use of tactical nuclear weapons. How seriously should we take this threat?
Very seriously, and I don't think that President Biden has taken it nearly seriously enough. This is the most likely scenario for a nuclear war in the world since World War II. Okay, this is the first time that Russia would ever be using nuclear weapons in a combat situation, as opposed to just testing them. And what's happening in Ukraine is horrific. But Vladimir Putin is losing. He doesn't. The word "losing" is not in his vocabulary. He's being humiliated, and that's what makes him so dangerous. If he could win this war conventionally, he would. I'm glad that he's not winning this war. But the only way Putin stays in power is by projecting fear on his own people and on his neighbors and on the world. And at this moment, the only way to reproject strength and fear is to use tactical nuclear weapons. And this is an incredibly dangerous moment in the world.
Yeah, this cannot be taken very well in the Middle East, especially in Israel. What is the reaction there?
Well, it's cautious right now. I mean, Israel was very slow to pick a side in this war early on. Why? Because they fear Vladimir Putin, right? Putin is arming, supplying, encouraging, and in a political alliance with the leaders of Tehran, the terror masters in Iran. That's what's dangerous. And Russian and Iranian forces are operating in Syria, just to our north. So Israel's heart is with Ukraine. Obviously, there's a Jewish president, Zelensky, in Ukraine. And there's been over time, there's been more and more statements in defense of Ukraine. But Israel worries that, we're a small country, 10 million people, and we don't want to pick a fight with a nuclear armed former superpower, especially one as dangerous as led by, Tsar Putin. So everyone's watching this very closely and fearful that a Russian-Iranian alliance is bad enough. But Russia actually using tactical nuclear weapons, that would change the world forever.
Indeed, it would. On the subject of nuclear weapons, the President of the United States delivered a speech to the United Nations this morning. He said during that speech, he mentioned Iran, which is obviously a threat to Israel. He said, and I'm quoting now, "The United States remains committed to preventing Iran from gaining a nuclear weapon. We are working with the P5+1 to engage Iran diplomatically and seek a return to the JCPOA. We're prepared to return to full compliance if Iran does the same." Your thoughts about that?
Well, Doug, this is why we're going to launch the Rosenberg Report, because what you have is a president of the United States who is showing weakness in the face of Vladimir Putin. Yeah, the United States has done some to help Zelensky and the Ukrainians, but not nearly all that Zelensky has asked for and that is needed. And now, Biden's rhetoric on Iran is fine, but the problem is the actions. Biden is begging, literally begging, the Iranians to accept this second round of an Iran nuclear deal. This is a deal that would give Iran's leadership, the terror masters in Tehran, $275 billion or so in the first year and upwards of $1 trillion over the next decade. This is not cash you want to see injected into a terror nation that's fomenting terror against, not just against Israel, but against our moderate Arab allies, Iran is supplying and funding and arming Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis. Iran's leaders say they want to not only annihilate Israel and wipe Israel off the map, the country I'm speaking to you from right now in Jerusalem, but the main focus for Iran's leadership is the United States, which they call the Great Satan. And when Biden pulled out of Afghanistan last year and surrendered to the Taliban after 20 years of fighting, and after the weakness he showed domestically and internationally, people in Israel and the Middle East are worried that countries like Russia, Iran, China, North Korea are feeling emboldened to take more and more aggressive action because they don't see strength in Washington.
Also on the subject of Iran, we're seeing some protests develop in Iran right now, largely by women, but the protests are gaining strength there.
When you have the worst terror regime on the planet, literally beating women to death, hanging homosexuals from cranes. Look, I disagree with homosexuality, but I don't think people should be hanging them from cranes. But does the president call out this terror regime? No, he's getting ready to inject $250 million and eventually $1 trillion into Iran. It makes no sense. President Trump, had the wherewithal, the courage to tear up the Iran nuclear deal and impose a maximum pressure campaign on Iran.
Tell us about your new show on TBN, the Joel Rosenberg Report. What's it all about? When can we expect to see it?
Well, you've set it up nicely because literally there's so much going on in the Middle East right now, and there's never been an actual weekly primetime television show produced in Israel, in Jerusalem, covering the news, analyzing it, and certainly not from a Christian worldview, a biblical worldview. That hasn't been on network television. It hasn't been on cable television. And I really commend the leadership at TBN for saying, you know what, it needs to be done. And Joel, would you be willing to do it? And I'm honored to start on October 6th, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific time, the Rosenberg Report. We will be covering these issues and all the more as the Middle East heats up. And we need to know, what is God doing in the midst of it? It won't just be looking at the horror show that's going on in Iran and elsewhere, but there are great, encouraging stories of hope of what God is doing, and nobody else is reporting it. We'll do that on the Rosenberg Report.
Can't wait to see it, Joel. It sounds to be like it's going to be a really exciting program, and it at the very, very least, is really, really timely. So we're looking forward to that. Joel Rosenberg, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Doug McKelway, and thank you for watching Centerpoint. We hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure you hit the subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you're notified every time a new video is posted. Leave a comment below and keep the conversation going by sharing this video with a friend who needs to see it. Thanks for watching. We'll see you back here tomorrow.